We'll see. But at least all the audio stuff should be good to begin with. Let me refresh the channel page and see if it's showing up. Never had that happen before. Though I have been kicked off by YouTube once.
You were streaming for too long for too few people.
I think because one of the things, okay, so it's going back live again. One of the interesting things that I've noticed with the analytics for the channel is that I always assumed that it would be more bumping on the weekends, but it's not. Uh, it's decidedly in the weekdays during between like 12 and 3. That seems to be the ideal time to go on and either release a video or to do a live stream or something. The usage in those hours, I'm guessing because people are eating lunch and looking for something to watch while they're eating, a much better time to do it. But I'm working during those hours, so I can't do it. Okay, everybody's starting to find their way back in. Sorry about that, everybody. I'm not sure what happened at all. It seems like the stream just went ahead and died. I did at least find out a way that I can send links into the chat, so that's a good thing.
I also just dumped it back into the Foundry Discord, so.
Oh, you didn't need to do that, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I'm sitting here. Why not, right?
Get some credit. There we go. Okay. So let's see if we can get everybody to find their way back in. And let me get back to... I'm not sure if this is going to show updated chat conversation. Open in web browser. There, now I should be able to see the new chat. Cool. So hopefully nobody who had asked a question in that. I think we answered most of them. Oh, Peachy did have a question about who I saw is already back in. That I'm loving Foundry, but I have had a few issues with long initial load times when we log in. I wondered if you guys had any ideas where people tend to go wrong.
Absolutely.
Yes.
100%. I can wager a guess that you probably used an importer module, probably like the D&D Beyond importer module, and pulled a whole bunch of content into your world. Am I right? It's pretty common for people to end up making the mistake of importing the entirety of Dungeons and Dragons, or in some cases, the entirety of Pathfinder, out of the compendiums and into the sidebar for actors, items, that kind of thing. If you've got a lot of sidebar items, it's entirely the culprit for long initial load times. Stick them in compendiums instead and only use the sidebar things that you're going to need in the next game or two.
Yes, and one of the easy things to do, and you might have actually just said it, but I was looking at another stat to make sure that nothing was broken, is that if you have everything in a folder, you can very easily right-click on that folder and do export to compendium. And then if you already have a compendium where you want it stored, you can send that into it. Just the one thing I would recommend is don't use your systems SRD or anything like that. So don't use the built-in D&D 5e monsters SRD, because when the SRD or when the D&D 5e system gets updated, or whatever system you use gets updated, it will replace all of the content in that compendium. So there is a guide on the Foundry subreddit for creating your own compendium sharing module, so you can share your compendium between your worlds. You can use that, or you can go to the compendium tab, hit create compendium, make one for yourself right there, export your whole folder into it, and that should hopefully do a good fair bit to make your initial load times a little bit better.
So one question that just popped up from Clark Moore is how big a map can Foundry handle? So we kind of hinted at this earlier, but the upper threshold depends on your video card, sort of. There are ways to get around this. The maximum texture size your video card can handle depends on the quality of your card. But you also have to think about what your players can handle. We generally recommend not using a texture size, that is to say, a map image greater than 8,000 by 8,000 for the file itself. Now, Matt, I notice you're back on the Dwarven Forge there,
Yes.
right? I'd like you to pop open the
Got it.
scene config and multiply whatever is actually just go to the grid scaler section and change the scale of the image to 6 times whatever it currently is. So just grid scale 6.
There.
Or sorry, map background scale 6.
Yeah, there we go. Commit changes. Yes,
I'm going from memory here. I'm not actually looking at the
No, you were
window.
pretty close. Oh wow, I actually can't zoom out enough to get the entire thing in or yeah, I can get most of it in focus. Now that it's expanded.
So with the background image scale set to 6, what you've done is actually increase your scene size significantly. Yes, because whatever the original image size was, it's now 6 times that. You can take this up as high as you want. Obviously, the quality of the image will suffer some if you go crazy and do something like 10 times the original size. But if you say want to do what I did in one of my initial campaigns, like you can see right now, it's 21,000 pixels by 21,000 pixels for scene image. I've taken great pains to subject my players to some humongous maps. For a while, I was running a fantasy campaign that was more about exploration than anything else. And I would create entire towns complete with buildings that the characters could walk into, place NPCs that the players could interact with, and just massive map size. The largest I ever did was 96,000 by something. And it was this big ocean portside town with this huge harbor in the middle and buildings on both sides. Mark Derbyshire asked what happened to the lighting when you rescale the image. So when you scale the background image, Foundry does not adjust for position of lighting, walls, tiles, tokens, or anything else in the scene. Which means if you were to do this with a map that had already been walled and lit, you're going to have to re-wall and relight it.
Actually, let me see, because I'm actually not sure if I drop this back down to what it was, which I believe was 1.2, and hit commit changes, and yes, should be good. What's now? Where did? Oh Lord, I'm not sure where it wound up going. Let me just refresh. That'll get it back, or should. There we go, and we can see that everything is back in its previous position. All of our walls and lights and everything like that. So if you do make that change, you can at least get back to it, which I think is not necessarily the case if you do if you change the padding of a map, but at least for the scale scaling tool, you should be able to get back to your previous setup.
Yes. One thing that I'll I just want to address real quick. Beardy Andy asks, a new, less technical DM in our group wants to try. How can I limit him to just upload files to his world folder so he doesn't get lost, please? There's not a good answer for that question. Uh, there are ways to limit player access by setting folders private or files private within the file browser, or by setting permissions so that players can't upload for that matter. For a GM account, however, it assumes that that person should have access to what they need to for your user data. One thing you can do uh, is one thing you can do, and this is kind of an operating system level trick, is operating systems based on a Linux file structure or a Unix file structure for that matter will not show any folder that starts with a period by default, which means if you go into the actual user data folder for Foundry and add a period to the beginning of the file name, it will disappear from the Foundry browser, but you can still access it as the GM or as an admin or really as any user if you know the name of that folder by typing it in manually. Uh, so it's kind of a sneaky workaround you might be able to use to jail your DM to a particular folder by only having one be visible to them. But it may be more trouble than it's worth for you.
Yeah, and I don't think I have any other clever solution. I think you hit pretty much every option of what you could do in that circumstance. Um, and I saw somebody mention that do, 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 instead of rescaling the map size, just lower the grid size, right? That way the walls and lighting don't change. And you could do that. The one issue with it though is that the grid does inform the size of things that are on the map. So, for example, with the Dwarven Forge, if we open the scene configuration for it and we drop, or actually, let's just kind of zoom in on something. Like we've got the anvil here that's sitting kind of dead in the middle between two different grid squares, indicating that it's a little bit less than 10 feet since the grid in 5e, each grid square represents 5 feet. If we go ahead and drop this down to, say, the lowest grid size that Foundry supports, which is 50, and we hit Save Changes, and we come in here, this anvil is now sitting over 4 different grid squares, meaning that it's now a 20-foot wide anvil. So the issue that you're going to run into if you start changing grid sizes like that is that the objects on your map won't be a size consistent with what you had intended originally. And you'll also see that some of these things, the lighting and things like that, do get moved around. And the size of them specifically, now that the map is significantly more grid squares than it was originally. But we can also come back, change that back to 140, and we should get everything back where we want it.
As a general rule, I advise everyone walling or lighting a map decide on what the scale of the map and the size of the map is going to be. Decide on the scale of the grid and size of the grid right at the beginning, because if you're going to change it later, you're going to have to redo all the walls, all the lights, tile position, token position. All of that's going to change, and you can drag them into position and reposition them, scale them, shift them. But honestly, it's just easier to delete it all and start from the beginning.
Yeah, that is one of the nice things with Foundry is that it's so quick to light and wall things that uh, to go back and re-wall this would not be uh, an extremely significant effort to get through. There's maybe one, two, three, four, five. There's a few dozen wall points on here. And actually, one of the things I'm thinking about with this map is that that could be pointed out is that the edge of the map here, uh, content won't be able to go outside of it. So if we move one of these lights over here, for example, you'll see that it starts to butt up against the edge of the map and gets cut off. So if you have your maps designed in a way where things wind up against the edge, you can at least not have to worry about light spilling over off into your empty grids or your players moving beyond that if you have the padding set to 0 or something like that. And then I think somebody just asked another question about wait, where did it go? Oh, that was just Beardy. Andy saying, thank you for that.
One thing that I want to touch on, Greg O'Grady says, I find most parties are willing to give you suspension of disbelief to compensate for map object size. Now, that is true. And I do agree with most parties doing that. There's something that I fell into when I first started with Foundry as a VTT that I see a lot in the core how-to room, and that comes up regularly in troubleshooting, and really it's an easy pitfall to have happen, which is we tend to think when we're walling and lighting a map that we need to be very accurate and precise in how detailed those walls are getting. And it's very easy to end up with a cave that has 30,000 walls on it when we're doing something like that. But from a player perspective, the biggest question you can ask yourself if you're going to wall and light a map is, what's the player going to experience this like? How are they going to see this? So there's a tendency to end up going, okay, well, I need to be line accurate. Every pixel needs to be perfect when placing these walls because I'm looking at it and I can see what the wall shape should be. But if you think of yourself and when you walk around in your own home or outside, or when you're even just in a new place, you're not paying attention to every little minor detail of every little wall. You're not seeing that because you're there for a reason and you're trying to get something done. You're just walking into a new store for the first time. You're not looking at the walls, you're looking for what you're there for. And players in a virtual tabletop, same thing. They're there for a reason. They want things a certain way, and they're aiming to get an objective accomplished. They're not looking for the detail of particular walls. They're looking for where's the next target? Where's the treasure chest? Where's X thing? And as a result, if you spend all your time prepping a map and walling in intricate detail, you are burning valuable DM prep time into walling, something your players won't ever notice.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the interesting points about this map is when I was first clicking into it, I was like, oh, I'll demonstrate what this actually looks like from the player's point of view. They'll see that it's blocked off. They won't be able to see beyond the walls. But then I realized that one of the things that was done on this map was using walls without a perception restriction on them, which makes sense when you think about how bright it is in this room and that the player's character is most likely tall enough to be able to see out and over any of these walls. And so while this might look like just a normal wall, what the actual use case and experience of the person moving through the world would be able to see out and over and into anything else pretty much in this space. And so always going with not necessarily what it immediately looks like, but what the best experience for your players is going to be is always the best thing to focus on.
Yeah. Okay. So this comes up a lot, and yes, Matt, I wholly agree. It's all about what's the player experience going to be like. Um, for this particular question, Peachy Melbs,
Mm-hmm.
uh, we see this question a lot, and it's how would you recommend handling daylight and dark interiors, lots of lights? Um, the answer is, and must hits at home, which is make light sources outside as the sun. That's my general approach. I try and not use maps that transition from outside to inside very often. But when I do, it's just a matter of sticking something with a daylight color to it outside the interior. And for interior sections, you place lighting as necessary. Um, for maps that are wholly outside, enable global lighting or global illumination in the scene config because players, chances are they're going to be able to see as far as they can see, unless it's something particular like a foggy day where you need vision restriction. On that subject, there's something I'd like you to demonstrate, Matt. I don't know if it's still the case. Click the token there to get vision. I don't know if you may have flipped on global illumination
I did, but I can get rid of it.
already. Um, if you do turn it off, do a reset on the fog. I recently interacted with someone who proposed a use case for needing to be able to show players floor plans of a building that they were already aware of, so they knew everything inside. It was a spaceship. Everything inside this ship, they knew where the rooms were, but they wouldn't be able to know what was happening or where people would be in that ship. So they needed in advance a fog of war kind of view. So their use case meant that the normal dynamic fog of war approach, and I noticed that I should probably have marked this particular map global illumination just due to the amount of light here. But to use that as an example, assume that the player can see everything ahead of them, but not necessarily see movement. Maybe it's hazy in here, so they know the general layout of the room, but they may not be able to make out details. One thing you can do in order to give your players a view of a scene is drop a massive ambient light source right in the center of the room, set as universal. And when you do that, you can click it off by right clicking it. And once your players are connected and you've activated the scene, flick that light on and then immediately off, and your players will have a full view of the map encoded into their fog of war data, but they will also not be able to actively see everything that's going on. So really it's just a matter of giving them that very brief view of the map in a way that lets them see the outline of the place, but not necessarily all tokens that might be moving around. And this is a really fast and it's kind of a workaround, but it also accomplishes the goal in a simplistic fashion.
And let me get rid of that white now because I added it in, demonstrated that your players won't be able to see kind of like an acolyte over here hiding, but they can have their explored version of the map. And that actually is an interesting use case. I had never thought of that as the solution before.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I really wish Foundry had a core tool for being able to mark an area as revealed to players in the fog.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps in the future it will be a feature, who knows? But this is kind of a workaround if you need to show a particular area or path to
Mm-hmm.
a player briefly. Now, because this is stored, fog stored on the account side, dragging a token around for your player when they're offline does nothing. But slamming through a quick universal light once they're online and just turning it on and off really quickly will show them the detail without having to show them the tokens.
Exactly. And there was did you what was that next question? Oh, yeah. Is there an easy way to create walls for hills where you can't see one way but not the other? And yes, there definitely is. Here, let me go over here and I'll get rid of all of these terrible lights that I've added to the map. Uh, and we can take a look at a one-way wall. So we've got a craw over here. I'll move him over to the wall. And we see that we can't see through it. If we change to the wall configuration, we'll leave perception restriction on and we'll change wall direction to left. Then you can see looking at the wall that the arrow is pointing to a wall this direction, which means that way the perception restriction is not applying. So a craw can see through it, but if we move through it, we can't see through the other way. So you can get one-way walls easily that way. And you can easily change the direction. It'd be nice if this updated the icon when you changed it, but it's not a big deal to hit the update wall to see which direction it winds up going. And you can do that in a path around a hill and have it the wall direction facing a specific direction depending on which side of the hill
While
they're on.
while you're in there, I'm going to throw a tip for a tool that most people probably have no idea how it works, because I certainly had no idea how it works.
I'll
But
change to it. I know what you're talking about already.
since you have just changed the configuration on that wall to have a direction, if you're going to set up something that has a wall direction, once you get one wall going the direction you want, the easiest thing you can possibly do then is take the clone walls tool and then, while holding control, click and drag from the region that the wall you just drew is, and you can use that to continue the wall segments in a logical fashion without having to do guesswork on which direction the wall is going to go.
Yes. So now we can see what that looks like. And then my movement restriction is also kicking in. And it's super cool. Ta-da. Though with that, you'd probably want to give some different visibility settings, but you can change it from there to do a lot of different useful things, whether it's just a one-way mirror or if you're on a hill or if you have a mountain that's up high and tokens up there, but and also some down below, and you want to control their visibility. It's super useful. Oh, and I think Nath might have frozen a little bit. That's okay. He's getting internet from space, so we're going to give him some slack on that one. And then I also saw somebody who posted a question about question regarding Foundry items. One of my players have a vicious rapier, so it does extra damage on crit. How would you implement that into the item? So if we go over to our items
I'll
directory,
I'll let you grab that, Matt, and I'm going to grab a beverage. I'll be right back.
you got it. So we'll make your vicious rapier, and we can come over to the details. I can't remember which weapon type a rapier is, but we'll leave it as a simple weapon. Attunement not required, and this will vary based on what your system is. But basically, we're just going to start with action type of melee weapon attack. Uh, ability modifier, we'll use dexterity because it's a rapier. Attack roll bonus, other formula, saving throw. I believe there are options for do action. There we go. Activation condition, target, touch, enemy, target 1, range, touch, duration, limited uses, rest. Ba-ba-ba. There we go. And you can add your attack roll bonuses as necessary. And then here in the other formula, if you were to add, we'll say like 1d8 for that. And then I believe just closing this should save it. I'll give this to Gra. And we'll make an attack with this. And I believe, yeah, so we've got our attack. And then if you crit, you can use your other formula, or whenever you're rolling like with a normal weapon attack, like with this mace, when you're doing damage, you can tag it as a critical hit, and you can also add a situational bonus for it, like 1d8. I'm not actually sure if there's a way to manually add a additional critical hit damage, or wait, maybe that's damage formula, or no, that's just for the type of damage. And so, Nath, you might actually have to teach me on this one. Is there an option for adding additional damage just on a crit beyond just the critical damage in the damage roll window?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I didn't.
So, as far as I'm aware, and I don't really get into this because criticals are handled somewhat differently in my system than in 5e.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I'm aware, there is no way to do that.
Yeah.
That being said, what I would say is if you want to do something rather complex like that, and apologies to those out there who might actually hear the weird drumming in the background. I actually have an African gray parrot sitting just behind me over here.
Aww.
Who is frustrated at the prospect that I exist. So he likes to try and threaten and intimidate me at random times of the day, which is partly why that half of his cage is currently covered. But what I do for something like this is I would strongly encourage the user who asks the question about the vicious rapier to drop into the D&D 5e channel on the Foundry Discord and ask about it there, because I guarantee you people who are way more experienced with the 5e system than I am will be able to give you a good answer on how to do this.
Yeah, my best guess was the other formula option that you can add to weapon attacks, that or doing a macro that you could roll on critical that would just roll whatever your additional critical damage is. But I'm also sure that there's somebody in the D&D 5e channel who would be able to give a more cogent and complete answer on all of that.
If I think about it in detail, I think you could perhaps accomplish this with an active effect.
Oh, we might have frozen on Nath for a moment there too. Sorry about that. It froze when you were starting to talk about an active effect.
That would be because I'm using Starlink, which, while great, I'm operating through space lasers, so you can understand sometimes it doesn't come through. I think you could probably accomplish this with an active effect, but I'm not 100% on that.
Okay. That's such a good tip. I've been looking for a way of rewarding players for looking for maps of hideouts as my players enjoy tactical planning. Yeah, that would be a great option for that. Um, what special effects? Oh, you already answered that. To animate lava. I'm also interested in custom crit as I simply add a full damage additional die rather than roll another. That's another option that you can do. And there's always the situational bonus and the damage roll. Um, and also just rolling again or doing the attack as a macro or something like that. Um, and then I search for a way to be able to bind macros to a weapons effects text field. Is there one? That's getting beyond what I'd be able to answer off the cuff. Um, Players should be able to make an attack and see the macro in chat. I think the easier way to do that might be to make the attack a macro to begin with, rather than making a macro fire on using an item. Though I do know that there's a bunch of automation systems that have also worked out how to automate running a macro for spell animation effects and things like that. So there's definitely a way to do it, but that one I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, it gets really complicated to try and deep dive into things like system macro creation in one of these streams, and particularly complex formula related to how a weapon is used.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that I'd probably struggle and bash my head around for a little while to make work in private, and in public with people watching would probably never be able to achieve it.
Yeah, it's whenever you're dealing with something like this where it's a complex technical question, like I could probably take 5 minutes and sit down in Discord and smash my face against it, but it becomes not great.
Yeah.
It's not great entertainment to watch someone do that in real time. Um, with regard to the specific question about binding something in a flavor text, what I'd probably do, and that ties back to the vicious rapier, which is I'd probably put a description, put it in the description. I'd probably throw in a inline roll with the calculation is how I do it. So do something like add bold text on crit and then do something like the formula wrapped in square brackets for the crit roll. And then when you link the formula, it'll put like an inline roll in instead of a damage button. God, I hope the bird isn't as loud to you guys as he is to me.
It's not too bad. Uh, Olivia, thank you for or Olivier, I think is the proper pronunciation. Thank you for those nice words. And the guest is Nath, who is the project manager for Foundry and man who is everywhere in the Discord. And I am never able to answer a question faster than. So I have faded into only making videos and responding to comments on YouTube because the speed at which people like Nath and everybody else on the Discord helps people is too rapid.
Yes, I'm going to make a very, very slight correction just for semantic reasons. I'm project coordinator
Yes,
for
sorry.
Foundry VTT. We don't have a project manager yet.
Da, 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 da. It's getting very spooky. Okay, and so that's, I think, caught up on questions that have come in. So if y'all have any other questions, feel free to posit them. And is there a dialogue system for interacting with NPCs?
Absolutely. It's called the chat log.
Yeah, the chat log definitely works. If if you're the DM, you can always, I believe, select a token to speak as it. If you're doing in character, do you have to do /IC to do that?
No, by default, it will talk as the token you have selected.
Yeah, so if I have this NPC selected and do hello there, will get a response, and if I had a robot, I could have it respond General Kenobi, but I don't. But that's one way that you can have all of that go through the chat log. I don't think that there's a module or anything that would give you automated like dialogue trees with NPCs, but I guess that is something that you could do uh if you wanted to. He couldn't use Foundry. Was that the game he was running was dice pool based? Do you guys know any way to get around that? I'm not familiar enough with dice pool based systems to be able to answer that. I'm not sure if you do, Nath. The whole question was, so I had a talk with some guy that said one of the reasons he couldn't use Foundry was that the game he was running was dice pool based. Do you guys know a way to get around that?
Yeah, so there are a number of dice pool based games. The one I'm most familiar with is World of Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness, New World of Darkness, whatever you want to call them. The D10 storyteller system is very dice pool based. So it involves a lot of rolling a huge chunk of the same die and trying to get a number of successes for how many dice are over a certain number. So Foundry uses the count successes dice modifier for that. You can find the details on the dice article on the Foundry page. Assuming your system is already supported in Foundry VTT through one of the awesome community developers, you can just use that system. If not, there are some special dice roller things that are available. One of the ones that was recently created, and I'm going to take a second and look because I want to get the name of the system right.
And while you're doing that, I've got up the dice rolling page that you can all find. It's foundryvtt.com/article/dice. And oh, wait, I have a way to actually share that with the chat now, where it won't be censored immediately. So there's a link to the dice page, and there's a whole bunch of complicated stuff that you can do with dice here.
Yep. It is a powerful dice system that's only going to get more powerful in 081. Small spoiler. There's there's a number of modules and systems as well that are made to kind of aim for a generic method of handling dice rolling. One that came out recently is James H's generic role-playing game aid, which has support for some specific D20 dice systems that aren't the norm, 3D6 system, a D100 system, and a few others. There's also a special dice roller module I can't remember the author of offhand that deals with a lot of stuff like that. Basically, if there's a system you're
I think our satellites have misaligned temporarily, but I'm sure Nath will be back in a second.
Someone asked, and I want to touch on this very briefly, what the timeline on release is and what the radar is for version 1. So there's this weird belief that Foundry isn't released because it's versioning with 0, and it's a fully released product. You can buy it right now. It's available on the website. It's fully functional, and I don't think Atropos would ever release a product for sale that he wasn't 100% confident in and proud of. I use it, and a lot of people, I will say thousands, use it on a weekly, if not daily basis. So what's on the radar as to what the timeline on release is? Now it's out. Go buy it. For the radar for version 1, no idea. We're not planning that far ahead. Currently, we're working on the '08 series, um, which is bringing some fantastic stuff like an audio overhaul, a complete overhaul of the back end API, which is great for module devs. There's talk we're bringing in asynchronous dice rolling, which may not mean much to you guys, but apparently is a very big deal for developers. There's also discussion of sorry, 082 is going to be introducing overhead tiles for things like roofs, tree canopies, that kind of thing, so that tokens can move below tiles that you've placed. 081's bringing a complete audio overhaul, which is fantastic so far. And in order to fix some dice parsing bugs, Atropos did some things to the dice roller in the last few days, which look great. So, yeah, big things coming in. Don't expect that version 1, when it is, if it is ever released as a version 1, will actually be any different than any version that came before it or afterwards. I don't think it's going to have much fanfare, just because that's the way we go.
Yeah, and just to add a bit on the versioning system. So there's a number of different versioning systems that you can use when you're working on software projects. And one of them is a style where anything below 1.0 is your alpha or it's your beta channel or something like that. And then once you hit 1.0, that's what you consider your kind of uh, full basic product or something like that. But Atropos has pretty specific ideas on versioning, and that means I think the official version that Foundry launched with was that 065, I think, or something in that range. Uh, it being sub 1.0 is not reflective of it being kind of a finished product or anything like that. Just the specific way that he wants to target releases for Foundry to indicate what's changed, where the second digit is kind of a major, possibly breaking release, and then the dot after that in the third position are minor releases that hopefully won't be as breaking as kind of the middle one. I'm actually not even sure in the way that he thinks about his versioning what updating the first integer in the x dot y dot z formula would translate to, but it's not something that I would expect to see anytime soon. And if anything, we're probably going to wind up with O dot 10 dot something before we're going to wind up with 1 dot anything.
Yeah, I'll be very amused if that's the direction it goes, because there aren't a lot of things that like, and I say this with the greatest of love for our development community. There aren't a lot of things that raise the ire of the community developers.
Oh, we might have lost Nath again for a second.
Oh, did I pop out again?
Yeah, now you're back though.
Um, yeah, so there's not anything as quite as much ire in the development community as discussing versioning. I'm not sure quite why it's such a uh, big deal that it inspires almost religious like zeal and fervor when you say that you're going to do a particular versioning system or not going to do a particular versioning system. But yeah, apparently it's a great way to start a fight. It's like walking into a bar where a particular sports team is popular and then saying they suck. It's a great way to just get a whole bunch of trash thrown at you.
Yep. And just as an example of that, I'm on the game system installation screen now. We can see D&D 5e is on version 1.2.4, whereas Pathfinder 2e is on 1.11.15.4470. And so the difference between the versioning numbers doesn't necessarily mean that Pathfinder 2e is significantly more updated than D&D 5e is, but they are using a very different versioning system that they feel equally as strong about, I'm sure, as Atropos does about his. And so we're not going to have both of them on at the same time to prevent fights.
All right, you go to your corner and you go to the other corner.
Exactly. Now defend Simver. But
Um,
that was probably more of an answer than you expected on 1.0. But it is an interesting topic that does come up, and I think people like to know what the logic is behind all of it.
so Philly Mays asked about asynchronous dice rolling, and I'm not going to pretend that I know enough about it to be able to give a comprehensive answer. So I'll oversimplify. Basically, asynchronous dice rolling will let module developers do things like um, wait for input from a website or from a
Oh, we'll see how long this one lasts.
roll something in Foundry. You'll see the cards will
Sorry to
show
interrupt you,
up
Nath,
in
but
your
you had
chat.
dropped out for a second there. I think you might have a bunch of clouds or
Starlink.
some aliens interfering with your satellite connection now.
Yeah, I got ET sitting on the satellite, re-aiming the laser. So yeah, it'll basically the way the way asynchronous rolling works, more or less, as I understand it, is it will let you use Foundry to connect to third-party rolling systems and wait for them to be used for rolling. Did I cut out again?
No, you're all good.
Okay. Um, so you can use something like a AI camera system where you roll your dice on the table and it inputs into Foundry, or you use something like the new pixel dice that are coming out, where you roll actual die, um, and the numbers that the pixel dice roll are actually dropped into Foundry when you roll a card.
So basically, yes, it is like quantum physics for TTRPG dice.
There were some very heated discussions surrounding the potential implementation of uh, asynchronous dice rolling, because it means some pretty significant changes to how dice are handled. Um, we're going to handle it gracefully, and it's very likely being implemented soon TM, but uh, it's another one of those things that's very I'll say divisive.
Contentious indeed. These are the things that most people get upset about. Dice rolling. I can understand why they're upset. No, I don't mean to minimize what they're saying or anything, but to what Greg O'Grady said, Atropos is pretty good at informing users about stability when announcing releases in the Discord. That's very true. For everybody who's been listening to the conversation about 08X and what it's going to include, just know for now that it's not anything you need to worry about. The stable 08 release that you'll be interested in is not going to be here for a while longer. We've still got 083 to see the results of, and then to fix all of the bugs that that's probably going to cause. And there will be time for module developers to get updated and in line with everything, because there were some, as usual with stuff that Atropos does, very big rewrites and deep work done on a lot of things that will all have to get resolved smoothly before we're all going to get to enjoy all of the fun stuff that he's been working on.
And I'll add to that for those of you who have uh, for those of you that have done the I'll say update cycle in other programs, not even necessarily virtual tabletops, but games. Uh, Unlike most games, when Foundry updates,
Oh, might have lost.
existence,
You're back. We lost you for a second
yay!
there.
It's probably that time of day. So,
Yeah, we won't keep you much
yeah,
longer. You've already
what
given
what I
more than enough time.
what I was saying was for most games beyond virtual tabletops, just in general, when you run an update on the core of that game, all of your modules are broken, period. Um, that's not necessarily so much the case with Foundry. We like to encourage users that if they're going to update to a new version, they should absolutely back up and should make sure that all their modules are updated after they update the core software. But just because Foundry releases an update doesn't necessarily mean that everything that you were using is now broken and useless. Uh, Atropos is extremely careful when he releases updates. And while we don't straight up think about, okay, this update might break X module, it's far less common for it to happen than it is for most mods in programs.
And I see somebody had asked a question about lava. It looks like you already got an answer, but it is using the dynamic lighting system with the swirling fog animation type and a nice kind of orange color that matches the lava. And then I also saw somebody was talking about are you informed about Roll20 dice algorithms? They're dropping
Right.
more 20s and 1s than one would expect, aren't they? Um, I uh, actually finally have a bit of information about dice rolling that is specifically about Foundry, but probably equally as well applies to Roll20 and the things that they're doing. That's about our rolling digital dice really random.
While
And
you while you drop a link to that article and the randomness, because it's a great video, one thing that I'll say is Roll20 has kind of a weird, chaosy quantum dice thing they're trying to do that I don't really understand, and I'm not going to pretend I have the mathematics background to grasp it. Um, we don't stay informed of that. I don't think we have any particular interest in it. We're not really all that worried about what our competitors are doing. We have kind of a more of a we're going to do what we want to do and our own thing, and if it happens to be better than or worse than our competitors, well, that's for the market to decide. We're not really interested in thinking about it as some kind of competition. The market's certainly big enough for everybody.
and yeah, so I just posted a link to it. It used a statistical analysis of several different runs of 10,000 different dice rolling with the rolling algorithm that Foundry uses, which is called the Merson Twister, which is a very common pseudo-random number generator, which has been pretty decisively proven for many decades, but people still are often suspicious of their dice, even though digital dice are probably on average more random than you would get out of physical dice, which might have issues with bubbling or worn edges or something like that, that reduces the randomness of the roll. I don't think with most systems you probably will have much of an issue with unfair or weighted results from your dice. Um, but it seems like whether it's digital or physical, people are going to suspect that they are being cheated in some way, regardless. Which is I can understand why you'd think that if your character's about to die and you really don't want them to, or you've had a terrible night or something like that. But one thing about things being random is that you are just as likely to get a random string of bad results as you are a random string of middling results or really good results. And that's why you'll have one night where you're on fire and another night where you can't roll anything higher than an 8. So I can't speak specifically to what Roll20 does. At least with Foundry, there's kind of a
Hmm?
testable, provable randomness,
Yeah.
uh, and I think most because I think Roll20 reports the results of their rolls on a kind of like statistical average page, and you'll find that most of those rolls wind up being pretty random as well. But that video that I just linked gets into a bunch of complicated math that I don't understand because Wendy, who's my wife, is smarter than I am. And she did all of the statistical analysis. So go and listen to her and not me.
Yeah. I'll also add to that um, Foundry uses Merson Twister, which is a amusingly the rolling system that I'm so familiar with just just because of exposure. I've been playing RPGs online in one form or fashion since I was a wee lad some 20 plus years ago. And pretty much every dice bot that I have ever used has leaned on Mercy and Twister. I have never noticed that it is any worse or better than rolling physical die, uh, just simply because rolling dice are not pleasant, they're not kind, and they will hate you. There's a reason why people post pictures of dice shaming to Reddit.
Yes, and the one unfortunate thing with using digital dice is that there is no option for a digital dice jail, though that would be a fantastic addition to Dice So Nice if anybody wants to get to work on it. Uh, I'm sure there's a number of people who would enjoy getting to roll and then put their digital die away for betraying them.
Hang on, let me open a message to JDW right now.
Yeah, I was about to say we need to get somebody on it stat. Because one thing that I noticed with Dice So Nice, but I don't know if it's an intentional feature or not. I've got to install it real quick. Is that once they have rolled, if you're quick about it, you can actually grab the dice and move them around. And I don't know if that's something that they're ever intending on doing something with or not. But let me here activate Dice So Nice, and once we get back in, we do a roll 1d20. We get this rolled across. If I come in...
Question from the community because Matt showed it out the Patreon and farm website. How many alpacas do we have now?
But yeah, this is something that I'm not sure if it's intentional functionality or not, but I would like it actually if they eventually did just leave the dice on your screen and you could grab them and roll them like this. But I have no idea if it's intentional or not. But
I believe it has been expressed as an intention from the Dice So Nice crew.
awesome.
But it requires asynchronous rolling before it becomes a possibility.
So this is a practical reason why folks can be excited about something that they don't understand, like me, asynchronous rolling. So we might be
Indeed.
able to get some cool interactive elements with Dice So Nice, and also get JDW working on a dice jail modification.
Um, someone amusingly
Oh, we lost Nath. I'm gonna get a die back and roll it around in the meantime until his satellites realign and we get him back. A digital die grinder. That would be very intense. Yes, you can move them. So if you grab them, it's a little inconsistent sometimes, but once it's finished rolling, it seems like you can grab it pretty much every time. Oh, we got Nath back.
Hey, I'm back. Um, So yeah, I've now opened a ping tool in the screen so I can keep an eye on when it drops out. Um, Christopher Lee asked how many alpaca we have. Uh, we have 25 and a half. We're co-owners on a award-winning male, so that would be the half portion. Um, and we're hoping to breed more award winners in the future.
And I'm sure you will, because the yarn and the materials that comes from them are delightful, and I would highly recommend it. Let me get our unofficial sponsors in here. So you may see both the logo sticker and the beautiful hat that my wife made, because she's also more talented than me. Uh, but it's great, and it's some of the softest knitted stuff that she's ever gotten, and she's been knitting for a few years. So I've touched a bunch of yarn, and this is definitely some of the best stuff. And you also get to see the alpaca that it comes from, and it's awesome. Highly recommend it. Farrago Ranch.
Yep, that is us. That's
Oh, somebody's looking for a dice wood chipper. That is a very very final way to deal with your the dice that have upset you. I only have one set of dice. I'm not a big like dice goblin or anything. I do have a treasure chest back there that's filled with dice, but that was just because we had players coming over that didn't own any dice and we needed to have some for them. But I have one set of dice, and I just figure if it's lucky or unlucky, that's just what my life is gonna be.
I have an absolute truckload of D10s, but for the most part, my physical dice are limited.
Did you play in a system that needed a bunch of D10s though, I'm guessing?
Yeah, Chronicles of Darkness, World of Darkness kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
All D10s all the time.
Okay, I've been missing out on a lot of unnecessary click clacking. Yeah. Maybe they would make die castles. Yeah, you could also do that. Uh, but I think we might be caught up on questions. I'm sure other folks will come in and ask more. Uh, what was I doing originally before the entire stream went off the rails when Nath came in? There we go. Oh yeah, I think we were looking at how lighting worked, but we've pretty much gone through all of lighting. We've taken a look at some walling. We even took a look at some tiling stuff earlier. We looked at the scene configuration for everything. Throughout the stream, we looked at uh, adding tokens to the map, dragging them in. One thing I'll say about tokens that you can do is if you hold Alt while you're dragging one in, you can drag it in invisibly. So that's a great way to get tokens in that your players don't know about, and prepare your players for an attack from a rogue or an invisible character or something like that. And we didn't look too much at actually creating actors or anything like that, but I think that's something that I've been intending to make a video on, like fully making actors and and items and stuff like that. But one other interesting thing that you'll probably need to know for your players once you've added tokens is configuring permissions for them. So we'll say that Accra is owned by Almac and give them owner permissions. And so now if Almac were to log in, they'd be able to see through their token, control it, move it around, and your players can have control over multiple different tokens, and they'll be able to change between them if they want to by either deselecting or releasing, to use a Tropist terminology, the token, and then clicking on another one, or they can press tab to switch between the tokens that they have control over, which is great if they've got a familiar or something like that. What other good token stuff do we have? Or actually, what are these messages coming in? Also, thank you, God Gamer, for the super chat. That's super nice of you. Might be fun if you could save whatever color settings you use and have a few sets you can quick swap between when one is behaving badly. That's actually, I believe, already possible to a certain extent if you come into your My Dice settings. I'm not sure if you can create new custom themes, but there are a number of themes that you can pick between, and then also change some of the other preset faces and things like that to get quick changes to your dice if you do want to swap them around to different things. Oh wow, there's a whole bunch of new menu options in here now with dice special effects. Oh wow, I didn't actually know this. So with Dice So Nice now, you can have a die type, and then on a specific result, you can have it have a new effect, like an epic win or an epic fail. That's awesome. I didn't know that. And there's now,
Neither did I.
yeah,
I guess
learned.
I'm going to spend most of tomorrow's game playing around with dice settings.
Yep. I need my nat 1 and my nat 20 effects, max damage. What are these special effects? They've got a white glow, darkness, glass impact, dormant TTI. I don't even know what that is. A double spiral blaze. Man, this module keeps getting cooler and cooler and cooler. That's awesome.
Uh, since you were talking about walling tricks
Yeah.
as a primary focus, there is one thing that I'm not sure if you may have already touched on because I came late to the stream, but it's another example that I used. I use it a lot. It's one of my favorite little tricks to pull. If you drop into one of the Spell Arena maps, I'm just going to pull the map name real quick. I can't
Sure.
remember which one. It's one of the early ones. I want to say it's like Cultist Temple or something like that. It'd just be the same.
It looks like we've got a demon temple, a forgotten temple. I'm guessing that's supposed to be of the sacred, or maybe it's on the on the sacred mountain. And then submerged temple. But you'll find it. I'll take a look at some of these other messages that are coming in. Pre-made stats onto a blank NPC sheet. So you can do things like dragging class features or overall class information onto them, and that will get you some of that information. You can also drag items and things like that. For things like attributes, you'll just want to edit those manually. There's no set of kind of like predefined types of attributes that you can drag on, but you can get a bunch of class features and stuff like that.
Right. So I found the map I was looking for. If you pull open the Spell Arena maps and go to Cursed Catacombs.
Cursed Catacombs. Got it and activated.
Just on the southern side, there's a small set of stairs.
Mm-hmm.
You'll notice that one of the things I did was wall this partway across with terrain walls.
Mm-hmm.
If you try and advance a token through it, you'll notice as well that I made these movement allowed terrain walls.
Mm-hmm.
So as you go through there, as the token advances through it, from the bottom of the steps, they can't see the top of the steps.
Mm-hmm.
While they're on the stairs, they can see both sides, and at the top of the steps, they can't see the bottom.
I like that.
And this is particularly useful if you have longer stairwells, but it was a good use case here as well, just because it makes it in the same way that you can't necessarily see what's going on downstairs if you're at the top of your basement steps. Likewise, if you're at the bottom, you're not going to see what's going on above. So it gives you this nice little transition, and it's super cheap for processing,
Mm-hmm.
but it also gives you the ability to use this terrain to cut off your players from each other.
And there's something about a staircase with a blocked vision on it that it's hard to get scarier than that, because you're like, oh, they're blocking our vision. There's got to be something up there. But there doesn't necessarily have to be. Just the fear that something might be up there is enough to make your players move more carefully throughout a map.
One of the things that I like to do is take advantage of a lot of the tropes and conditioned behavior that people develop as a result of playing particular role-playing games for a long time. I'm not a GM who regularly places traps, but because some of my players come from backgrounds where pretty much any hallway that didn't have anything in it was trapped, any door they tried to open was trapped, etc. I like to use that against them and give them long, long stretches where nothing is trapped and where there's no reason to be abundantly cautious. And then when I feel they've gotten appropriately complacent, then I'll throw one in.
Just enough to keep the anxiety going.
Because there's nothing worse than a player out of character being unnecessarily cautious in situations they don't need to be.
Well, and you're running a horror campaign, so it's even better if every moment, if even just turning a corner is enough to have them on edge. That's great.
Yeah, and ultimately it's about subverting player expectations. If you want to really drive a feeling of horror, the way to do it isn't to tell them what to expect, because unknown is the greatest fear. So if they expect that there's going to be traps everywhere, they're not going to be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to condition them for fear, you need to make them expect that traps are everywhere and not give them traps. You need to make them expect that something completely normal isn't.
And I saw a couple questions coming in about our group plays Star Wars, any modules you know of to do blaster type effects. So in terms of blaster effects, if you mean animation wise, there are a few animation modules that you can use from the likes of like JB2A and a few other creators that have free module packs, but also additional module packs on their Patreon that you can get. And there's enough like laser style spells that you can probably use for a similar effect. If you mean sound effects, there's also I think some sound pack modules. And one thing that I use a lot is there's a company called Sonus that does game developer audio packs that they've released for free. They do it once a year, and they release it with hundreds and hundreds of sound effects. And I've actually been in the process of trying to organize and sort it into more usable functions. And I've gotten through the first two of them. Maybe the third one is started, I think, but it's not finished yet. But there's a bunch of awesome sound effects for weapons, for doors, for water, for pretty much anything you can think of. You can find some sound effect that will match with it well. So if you're looking for sound effects, that's what I'd recommend. I'm not sure any other blaster effect style stuff that you could need in Foundry other than kind of animations and sounds for it. Um, but do you have a short list of absolutely must install modules every time? Uh, I will not link the article that is on
I
Foundry
would.
Hub. I try to it feels almost antagonistic to me to do that.
So
I understand the
so
point, and it's a fair point, but I
so I kind of positioned this earlier. There is a tendency when someone installs Foundry BTT for the first time for some members of the community, and indeed for that person themselves, to hasten towards module recommendations and installing every module they can find that sounds cool. But there's one key problem with that, which is it results in a separation between what core Foundry features are and what was added by a module, and it makes it very difficult to tell if something's going wrong, whether it's a problem with the software or a problem with a module. In addition, many of these modules may not actually work well with each other. So, there's a great article, and it was written in part on recommendation to take this tack, that while modules are great, and we certainly value our module development community, it's important to take your time learning the software. So having a list of recommendations of all the modules you should install isn't really a great way to go, because it's not going to be great for everyone. different systems and different GMs even use different tools. The example I gave earlier is I don't have Dice So Nice installed on any of my servers because I play games that don't use dice. So it's it's important not to dive too deeply into module installation right away. My advice is always get used to the software, and while you're getting used to the software, if you find that there's a particular feature you'd like that you're thinking of when you're working with the program, chances are there's already a module that does that thing. Find that module and install it as necessary. If you go that route, you won't run into trouble and you won't end up with 400 modules with no idea what's doing what.
Yeah, and in terms of modules that I'd recommend, I don't actually run a very module heavy game. I know a number of people that have non-exaggerating an exponential amount more modules than I do because I typically run around like 9 or 10 of them active at a time that are not super intrusive into how Foundry works. Um, so I don't have a huge amount of recommendations, but I do have some videos on modules once you've learned and gotten used to Core Foundry and what you can do with it and what the limitations are, if there are any, for how you want to play. And then if you find anything that's annoying, I would say, hey, this is annoying me in this game. Is there a solution for it? And there's probably something that can be done, uh, either with a module or a macro or something like that to make it a little bit easier. But I would definitely make sure that you know how the core software works first before diving into any of that. And I want to hit one question specifically that somebody had asked about good maps for Mythic Odysseys of Theros, because I think Foundry already has a built-in good solution in the module, the Cycle of Cerberus, which was another adventure that got released uh, with Foundry, with everything pre-walled and done for you automatically. And while Nath was talking, I just installed the module, imported the scenes from the Cycle of Cerberus scenes, and you can come in here, and there's a bunch of maps in here that look great for a Mythic Odysseys of Theros style game with some kind of Greek looks and things like that. The Forest of Artemis. So all of these would be great maps that you can get access to, and then looking at all of the artists that contributed to these, checking out their Patreons and stuff like that, and you're going to find a lot more awesome content that's in a similar style that I think would work really well.
Um, Mike Bike, real quick, asks if there's a good way to deal with roofs. Uh, I don't know the functionality of the Foundry Roofs module right now. I think it's pretty good. Um, it's a third party module made by Vance, maintained by someone else right now, I think, which works pretty good, and is probably good enough that it will get you by. I would probably go the route you're currently going, which is extracting them as a PNG anyway, because you're going to need that for the tiles. Uh, in 082, Atropos is working on a roof system that will still need tiles, but will probably make most of the Foundry Roofs module into core. We'll see. I'm not entirely sure what approach he's going to use yet. It's always interesting to watch him take something that someone has done a particular way and do it in his own way, because Atropos is very good at creating elegant solutions to problems. Not to say that the Foundry Roofs module is by any means a problem. It's a great implementation. More that the idea of adding 3D space to a 2D environment is itself complicated.
Yeah, and
Uh,
Atropos, of course, also has the benefit of if there's a part of the software that isn't friendly to the way that he wants to implement it, that he can then rip it out and make adjustments to it, which the module developers don't have the benefit of doing. So he's able to get such a tightly integrated version of it out that
exactly.
it's great. And I saw somebody mention that they had issues where their menu windows all opened transparent. My recommendation for that would be disable any modules that you've got running, because there might be some CSS overriding something or causing uh, some of the styles to not load, or breaking the loading, or something like that with how the CSS is being put together. And if that doesn't do it, definitely head to the Discord, because there's a couple other things I can think of that have been weird before. And I'm also curious if you're hosting, or if you have it running locally on your machine, because it could be that there's an issue with your server environment where your static files aren't getting served out properly, or something like that. But that's definitely not the intended case. All of those things should not be transparent.
Beardy Andy, before I answer you, I'm about 10 minutes out from 6 p.m. on the West Coast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hang around for another 10 minutes or so, but um, then I'm going to go stick my head in some virtual reality and die a lot. So Beardy Andy asks, good solution for playing a sound once automatically when a token is close. Automatically for that use case doesn't exist right now. The way I'd probably go, and the way I've gone recently, is using Blitz's soundboard. When someone moves close to something that I want to trigger a sound, I'll send it to that player specific.
Yeah, and I was trying to think if there was anything that you could do with token attacher with a sound, local sound source or anything, but I don't think there is, because there's no way to limit a ambient sound to only play once. So yeah, I don't think there's going to be a super simple way of implementing that now.
Yeah, absolutely. Blitz's soundboard is the way to handle single sound play to one person.
Yeah, 100%. Uh, Now I've lost track of where we are. There's a bunch of stuff back here. Players have the most fear of my DCs. Never realized that until they said that. Remember that you know much more things than your players do. Yeah, that's definitely true. Use the asymmetrical level of information that you as the GM have uh, against your players as much as you can. Because even if you don't find it scary, them not knowing what's about to happen, they're definitely more likely to be afraid of something. Make automated traps. Now, do any of these have questions?
I actually have a great example. God Gamer just asked, is there a way to have animated tokens and building destruction that can block movement?
Ooh.
So I use a lot of very interactive environments with my players during combat scenarios, because I don't like the environment that a player character is working within to just be useless. There's a really great section of, I think it's either on Keith Baker's blog or it's written into the 5e book for wow, why can't I remember the name of that setting?
For which one? Sorry, I was getting caught up on the chat because I realized I was super far scrolled up.
D&D 5e setting has lightning rail in it. Oh god, I'm gonna hate
Oh,
myself.
Eberron.
Eberron, yes.
It shouldn't have taken me even the second it did, because I'm playing in an Eberron game.
Yeah, so there's a really great alternate rule set that Keith Baker wrote either into the Eberron book or on his blog that discusses using the environment around players as actions. So to give them alternate actions to take to engage with the environment. And it's just fantastic and really inspirational as a way to provide new ways for your players to engage in fights when they may not necessarily be able to make that stupid sword attack or throw that spell. So I use a lot of terrain effects and line of sight tricks, and I've got a lot of assets from Forgotten Adventures for debris and destructive terrain and blood and bodies and pieces of people and stuff, really gory stuff like that, that I use on an almost weekly basis whenever there's a combat. If a player, because I'm playing a modern campaign, throws a grenade in a room that has a lot of debris, there's going to be more debris. So if a wall collapses, what I'll do is I'll drop a tile that's a bunch of rubble, and I'll literally just jump into the wall layer and just real quick drop a terrain wall around it, because they can still see the terrain, but now it's obscuring line of sight and they can't move through it.
And if that's,
So,
or you continue.
no, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and if that's the kind of thing that you think might happen in your game, there are a lot of things that you can do to prepare for it, like having pre-placed tiles if you know that part of a map is going to get destroyed when an enemy comes in, and then you can just pop on the change the visibility on it the same way that you would with a token, and then suddenly you've got things falling on the map in front of your players. You can add the walls in very quickly. There's a whole bunch of great stuff that you can do.
Yeah, it's if you have the tiles handy. Like if I know there's going to be a combat scene, I'll keep a bunch of tiles that are similar, just made invisible so that I can see them, but the players can't. And when I need them, I'll move them into place, or I'll copy and paste them into place, toggle the visibility, throw the wall around them, done. Greg asks if I'm using these tiles with transparent backgrounds. Yes. If you're using tiles, they should have transparent backgrounds. They should be WebP, ideally, or pings. Um, those are the ones that are going to get you the best effect, and it's not going to mess too much with the already existing map content that you have going on.
Yeah, and there's lots of places where you can get great tiles, animated or otherwise, and there's some that are already in packs in Foundry that you can get super easily. Uh, so definitely go through the content packs in Foundry if you're curious to add new stuff to your games. I saw somebody asking earlier where some of these scenes were coming from. The one that I was working in Spooky Old Building, this is from Jipeku, the River Styx, and all of these maps over here are all from the Cycle of Cerberus. And some of the maps we were looking at earlier with like the lava flow and stuff like that are all from Spell Arena. But you can find even more than that all in the free Foundry packs, and then you can find more stuff on all these creators' Patreons because they're all really great.
Yeah, if you're looking for some ideas of where to get assets, just hit the Foundry partners list or Foundry exclusive content list on our website. You will find links to so many creators that are out there with so much content you won't know what to do with it.
Yes. Yeah, with just the stuff that's in Foundry from even just individual creators, like all of these maps from Spell Arena, this is enough for a huge chunk of your campaign. Uh, if you can find ways to work them in, and then once you add in all of the other artists that are available, you almost don't need anything else. And then I believe uh, Maury had asked a question about Roll20 converter, and for that I don't actually know anything about it because I've never played on Roll20, but I would recommend you go to Kakaroto's Discord and hit him up. He's the one that does the Roll20 converter, and you should be able to find that Discord link in his Patreon, which I think you have to subscribe to get the converter. And they're normally pretty responsive over there to issues, because I'm not sure if it's a problem with how the converter is working or if it's how your server is set up, where it's not loading. But they'll be able to at least find out if it's an issue with the converter, and then if it's not, we can dive into something else as possibly being the cause. But that's what I would guess, or where I would guess the answer would be. And thank you so much for those kind words, Johannes. I appreciate that a lot. Oh, everybody was calling out Eberron. These tiles. Yeah, thanks because I have them fighting a dragon. Awesome. And I see it's about to hit 8:59 for me, which means it's just about to be 6 for you, and that is a good call off point, I think. Thank you so much for coming on the stream, Nath. It was awesome. And I think gave everybody a lot more information than they otherwise would have been able to get uh, on a lot
Well,
of these questions.
it was nice. I enjoy the opportunity to engage with the community through something other than text for once. I Of course, you can always find either of us on the Foundry Discord, which, if you're not a member of, you should absolutely join. And thanks everyone for coming out and asking some really great questions. I'm glad I could pitch in and just kind of hang out and chill with you guys.
Yeah, this whole thing was a lot of fun. And I haven't done a stream in a while, but it is always a good time. And I think I'll definitely have to start doing some more because it's fun hanging out with everybody and going through stuff. But it's about 9 p.m. here. This started 4 5 hours ago, I think. And I thank you, Nat, so much for spending so much time. That was awesome. And at the very least, I and possibly Nath, if he doesn't hate me after this. Oh, my wife was actually one of the people saying Eberron. I just realized. She's probably going to yell at me later for not catching it faster. But thank you so much for coming on. It was awesome. And thanks, Atrobus, for watching at the beginning too and answering some questions. We'll come back on a stream with y'all before too long, I'm sure. At the very least, I will. I hope all of y'all had a good night and fun time watching and you learned some cool stuff. Be sure to check out any of the other stuff on the channel for more information. Come to the Discord, check out the Foundry or the Leave Extraordinary Foundry VTT Developers Discord, all the creators' Patreons and stuff like that. And I'll see you in the next one, whenever the next one is. Thank y'all so much. Bye bye.